Have you ever been humiliated in front of dozens of people by someone who was supposed to be family? I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that makes your hands shake, your heart pound, and your entire world crumble in the span of 5 minutes. Picture this. A luxury boardroom on the 47th floor of a glass tower in Manhattan. Marble floors so polished you can see your reflection. A table so long it could seat 30 people comfortably. And me, standing at the head of that table, presenting 3 years of my blood, sweat, and tears to the board of directors. I was the chief innovation officer of Sterling Global Enterprises. I had built entire divisions from the ground up. I had generated over $200 million in revenue for that company. And in that moment, my billionaire father-in-law, Richard Sterling, stood up in his custom Italian suit, looked me dead in the eye, and said the words that would change everything. "You're fired. Security will escort you out. Pack your desk within the hour." The room went silent. 22 of my colleagues sat there frozen. Some looked shocked. Others looked away. And me, I stood there feeling my entire body go numb. But here's the thing. That wasn't just a firing. That was a declaration of war. And what Richard Sterling didn't know was that I don't break easily. What he didn't expect was that when I walked out of that boardroom, I wouldn't be walking out alone. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. My name is Alina Moss, and before I became the woman who brought down one of the most powerful corporate empires in America, I was just a girl from Ohio with big dreams and a bigger work ethic. I grew up in a small town outside Cleveland. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a teacher. We didn't have much, but we had love and we had values, hard work, integrity, loyalty. My parents drilled those into me from the time I could walk. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I worked 3 jobs to pay my way through business school. I graduated top of my class with a degree in business administration and a minor in technology management. I wasn't handed anything. Every single opportunity I got, I earned. I clawed my way up from unpaid internships to entry-level positions at tech startups. I learned everything I could. I networked. I stayed late. I came in early. By the time I was 28, I had a reputation in the industry as someone who got things done, someone innovative, someone you wanted on your team. That's when I met Daniel Sterling. It was at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was presenting a panel on digital transformation strategies for legacy companies. Daniel was in the audience. Tall, handsome, with kind eyes and a smile that made my stomach flip. After my talk, he came up to me and introduced himself. He told me my presentation was brilliant. We talked for 2 hours over coffee, then dinner, then breakfast the next morning. He didn't tell me his last name was Sterling, not at first. When I finally Googled him 3 days later, my jaw hit the floor. Daniel Sterling, son of Richard Sterling, the founder and CEO of Sterling Global Enterprises, one of the largest multinational conglomerates in the world. Billion-dollar empire, old money, power, influence. I almost didn't call him back. I thought we were from 2 different worlds, but Daniel was persistent. He showed up at my apartment in Boston with flowers and that smile. He told me he didn't care about money or status. He said he just wanted to get to know me, the real me, and I fell for him, hard. We dated for a year before he proposed. It was perfect. A surprise trip to Paris. A ring that probably cost more than my college education. And a promise that we'd build a life together based on love, not his family's wealth. I said yes without hesitation. Daniel was everything I'd ever wanted. Kind, supportive, passionate about making a difference in the world. He worked in the nonprofit sector, deliberately choosing not to join the family business. He wanted to forge his own path. I respected that. I loved that about him. But when we got engaged, everything changed. Richard Sterling demanded a meeting, not a family dinner. A meeting in his office. I remember walking into that building for the first time. Sterling Global Headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. 60 floors of steel and glass, a monument to power. I wore my best suit. I prepared myself mentally. I knew this was important. Daniel had warned me his father could be difficult, but he assured me everything would be fine. Richard Sterling's office was bigger than my first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Antique furniture. Original artwork on the walls. And behind a massive mahogany desk sat the man himself. Richard Sterling, mid-60s, silver hair, sharp features, cold blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. He didn't stand when I entered, didn't shake my hand, just gestured to a chair and waited for me to sit. Then he spoke. His voice was calm but firm. He told me that Daniel was his only son, his heir, the future of the Sterling legacy. He said that while he had no control over who Daniel chose to marry, he did have expectations. I needed to understand the responsibility that came with the Sterling name. I nodded. I told him I understood. I explained my background, my education, my career. I thought if I showed him I was accomplished in my own right, he'd respect me. He didn't. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and said something I'll never forget. Daniel can marry whoever he wants. But you need to prove you're not just after his money. You'll sign a prenup, and if you're serious about being part of this family, you'll come work for Sterling Global. Show me what you're really made of. I was stunned. Insulted, honestly. But Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered that it was okay. That if I didn't want to, we didn't have to do any of it. But here's the thing, I'm competitive. I'm proud. And I wasn't about to let Richard Sterling think I was some gold digger who couldn't handle myself in his world. So I signed the prenup. And I accepted his job offer, Director of Digital Strategy. It was actually a good position, better than what I had at the time. And I told myself I'd prove him wrong. I'd show him I belonged, that I was more than capable, that I was an asset, not a liability. Daniel and I got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Just close family and friends. It was beautiful. I was happy. And I threw myself into my work at Sterling Global. I was determined to succeed, to earn Richard's respect, to make a name for myself in that company. And you know what? I did. I exceeded every expectation. I launched initiatives that transformed entire business units. I brought the company into the digital age. Within a year, I was promoted to vice president. A year after that, chief innovation officer. I had a team of over 50 people. I was invited to board meetings. I was making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. I was thriving. But the more successful I became, the colder Richard got. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Little comments here and there, dismissive remarks in meetings, taking credit for my ideas, but it was subtle, passive-aggressive. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I just needed to work harder, prove myself more. Daniel noticed, though. He saw how his father treated me differently than other executives. He confronted Richard about it more than once. But Richard would just brush it off, say he was being objective. That business wasn't personal. That if I couldn't handle the pressure, maybe I wasn't cut out for the role. So I pushed harder. I worked longer hours. I delivered results that were undeniable. And for a while, it seemed like things were getting better. Richard even congratulated me once after a particularly successful product launch. I thought maybe, finally, I'd earned his respect. I had no idea that behind the scenes, he was plotting to get rid of me. It started small. Projects I was leading suddenly got reassigned. Budgets I'd been promised were cut. People I'd hired were moved to other departments without my approval. I brought it up in meetings, but Richard would always have an explanation. Company restructuring, strategic realignment, budget constraints. It all sounded reasonable on the surface, but I felt it, the walls closing in, my authority being undermined. Then came the rumors, whispers that I was difficult to work with, that I was overstepping, that I was only in my position because I was married to Daniel. It was subtle at first, but it spread. I could feel people looking at me differently. Questioning my decisions, second-guessing my leadership. I tried to address it head-on. I scheduled one-on-one meetings with my team. I asked for honest feedback, and that's when I discovered the truth. Richard had been having private conversations with several of my direct reports, planting seeds of doubt, suggesting that my role might be temporary, encouraging them to distance themselves from me professionally. I was furious. I confronted him directly. Walked into his office unannounced and demanded to know why he was sabotaging me. He didn't deny it. He just sat there calm as ever and told me that I'd gotten too comfortable, too powerful, that I was forgetting my place. That Sterling Global was his company and he decided who had power and who didn't. I told him I'd earned my position, that my results spoke for themselves. He laughed, actually laughed. And then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "You're my son's wife. That's all you'll ever be in this company, and the moment you stop being useful, you're gone." I left his office shaking. I went straight to Daniel and told him everything. He was horrified. He wanted to quit his nonprofit work and confront his father immediately. But I stopped him. I told him I could handle it, that I wasn't going to let Richard bully me out of a job I'd earned, that I'd keep doing excellent work and he'd have no grounds to get rid of me. But deep down, I knew the truth. Richard Sterling didn't need grounds. He was a billionaire CEO with absolute power, and I was a threat he wanted eliminated. The breaking point came 3 months later. I'd been working on the biggest project of my career. a complete digital overhaul of Sterling Global's operations. Cloud integration, AI-driven analytics, automated workflows. It was revolutionary. It would save the company hundreds of millions of dollars and position us as an industry leader. I'd spent 18 months developing this plan. I'd run pilot programs that exceeded every metric. I'd secured buy-in from every major department head, and I was scheduled to present the full proposal to the board of directors for final approval. This was it. The moment that would cement my legacy at Sterling Global, the proof that I belonged, that I was more than just Daniel's wife. I prepared for weeks. Every slide was perfect. Every data point was verified. Every question anticipated. The morning of the presentation, I felt confident. Ready, I kissed Daniel goodbye and headed to the office. The board meeting was at 10. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. 15 board members, senior executives, Richard at the head of the table, of course, and my entire leadership team seated along the sides. 22 people total, all eyes on me. I set up my presentation, smiled, took a breath, and began. For the first 10 minutes, it went perfectly. I walked them through the current challenges, the market opportunities, the competitive landscape. I showed them the pilot results, the financial projections, the implementation timeline. People were nodding, taking notes, asking good questions. I was in my element. And then, right as I got to the final section, the part where I outlined the investment required and the expected return, Richard stood up. The room went quiet. He didn't ask a question. He didn't wait for me to finish. He just stood there staring at me with those cold blue eyes, and then he spoke. His voice was calm, almost casual, but every word was a knife. I've seen enough. This project is a waste of company resources. The analysis is flawed. The projections are unrealistic, and quite frankly, I question the judgment of anyone who would propose something this reckless. I stood there, stunned, speechless. He wasn't critiquing my plan. He was destroying it. In front of everyone, without even letting me finish, I tried to respond, I tried to defend my work, but he cut me off, told me he didn't have time for excuses, and then he said the words that shattered everything. Effective immediately, you are terminated from Sterling Global Enterprises. Your access will be revoked. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to clear your personal belongings from your office. The room exploded into shocked murmurs. I felt my face go hot. My hands started shaking. I looked around the table, at my team, at the executives I'd worked with for 3 years. Some looked away. Others looked just as shocked as I felt, but nobody said anything. Nobody stood up for me. I looked at Richard. He was already sitting back down, dismissing me like I was nothing. Like 3 years of my life meant nothing. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't speak, couldn't move. And then something incredible happened. Jessica Chen, my VP of technology, stood up. She looked at Richard and said, clear as day, if Alina goes, I go. Then Marcus Rodriguez, my senior project manager, stood up. Me too. Then Amy Park. Then David Kumar. One by one, 22 people in that room stood up. My entire leadership team. People who had worked with me. Who knew the truth, who knew what I'd built. They all stood in solidarity, and together we walked out of that boardroom. The walk from that boardroom to the elevator felt like a mile. My legs were moving, but I couldn't feel them. I was numb, completely and utterly numb. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, 22 people following me out. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked at them, if I saw the solidarity in their faces, I knew I'd break down right there. And I refused to give Richard Sterling the satisfaction of seeing me cry. The hallway seemed to stretch forever. Past the glass walls where other employees were working, oblivious to what had just happened. Past the executive offices with their heavy wooden doors. Past the reception area where Richard's assistant, Margaret, sat with wide eyes and her hand over her mouth. She'd worked for him for 15 years. She knew exactly what kind of man he was. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. My team filed in around me. It was a large elevator, but with 23 people, we were packed in tight. The doors closed, and for a moment, nobody spoke. We just stood there in silence as the numbers descended. 47, 46, 45. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors. I looked pale, shell-shocked. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the devastation in my eyes. It was Jessica who broke the silence. She put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. That was wrong. What he did to you was completely wrong. Her voice cracked with emotion. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Marcus spoke next. We all know what you've done for this company. We know the truth. Then Amy. You're the best leader I've ever worked for. If they don't see that, they don't deserve any of us. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened into the massive lobby with its marble floors and modern art installations. Security was already waiting. 4 guards in their crisp uniforms, looking uncomfortable. They knew me. I'd always made a point to learn people's names, to say good morning, to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position. Now they had to escort me out like a criminal. The head of security, Thomas, stepped forward. He was an older man, ex-military, with kind eyes. Ms. Sterling, I'm sorry, but I need to ask you to come with me to collect your belongings. I found my voice. It came out smaller than I intended. It's Ms. Moss, actually. I kept my maiden name. He nodded. Ms. Moss, of course, I apologize. We moved through the lobby like a strange parade. Me, 4 security guards, and 22 employees who just quit their jobs. People stopped and stared. Whispers started immediately. I could feel the eyes on me, the judgment, the curiosity. The gossip mill was already churning. By the end of the day, the entire company would know what happened. By tomorrow, the entire industry would know. The thought made me sick. My office was on the 42nd floor. We took a different elevator this time. The ride up was just as silent as the ride down. When we reached my floor, I walked through the space that had been my domain for 3 years. The open floor plan with its sleek desks and collaborative spaces. The glass-walled conference rooms where we'd brainstormed and strategized. The innovation lab where we'd tested new technologies. My office was in the corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A view I'd earned through countless late nights and sacrificed weekends. A view I'd never see again. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. The photos on my desk, the awards on the shelf, the whiteboard covered in notes and diagrams from my last planning session. 3 years of my life contained in one room. Thomas cleared his throat gently. I'll get you some boxes. I nodded and stepped inside. My hands were still shaking as I started gathering my personal items. Photos of Daniel and me. A plant that Jessica had given me when I got promoted. Books. Notebooks filled with ideas and plans. My degrees hanging on the wall. I took them down carefully, removed them from their expensive frames. The frames could stay. They probably belonged to the company anyway. Jessica, Marcus, and Amy came to help. The others waited outside, giving me space but staying close, showing their support with their presence. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? We just packed in silence, years of work reduced to 3 cardboard boxes. As I was taking down the last photo, my phone started ringing. Daniel. I'd forgotten about Daniel. He didn't know yet. Didn't know his father had just destroyed my career in front of 24 witnesses. I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't talk to him right now. Couldn't process this with him while I was still in this building. While security was literally standing over me making sure I didn't steal company property, my phone buzzed with a text. Just heard something happened. Are you okay? Call me. Word traveled fast. Someone must have already told him. Probably Margaret. Or maybe Richard himself putting his own spin on the story, making me out to be the problem. The difficult daughter-in-law who couldn't handle the pressure. I finished packing. 3 boxes. That's all I had to show for 3 years of my life. 3 years of sacrifice, of proving myself, of building something meaningful. All reduced to 3 cardboard boxes that I couldn't even carry out myself because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus and David took the boxes. We've got these, Marcus said. Thank you, I whispered. It was all I could manage. We walked back to the elevator, back through my floor where my former team members watched with mixed expressions. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked nervous, probably worried about what this meant for them. A few looked relieved, like they were glad it was me and not them. The ride down to the lobby felt faster this time. The doors opened and we walked out. Thomas led us to the exit. At the doors, he stopped and turned to me. For what it's worth, Ms. Moss, I've seen a lot of people come and go in this company. You were one of the good ones. What happened up there, that wasn't right. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Thomas. That means more than you know. He nodded and held the door open. And just like that, I walked out of Sterling Global Enterprises for the last time. The sidewalk outside was crowded with the usual Manhattan chaos. People rushing past, completely unaware that my world had just imploded. The contrast was jarring. Inside that building, everything had just changed. Out here, life went on like nothing happened. Jessica, Marcus, Amy, and the rest of my team gathered around me on the sidewalk. We stood there in a cluster, 19 people who just walked away from 6-figure salaries and promising careers. All because they believed in me. All because they knew what Richard had done was wrong. I finally found my voice, really found it. I don't know what to say. What you all just did, walking out with me, that was incredible. But it was also crazy. You had no obligation to do that. You just gave up your jobs, your security, your benefits for me. Jessica shook her head. Not for you, for what's right. What Richard did wasn't just wrong, it was illegal, wrongful termination, hostile work environment. You built that department from nothing. You made sterling global millions. He fired you in front of the board without cause, without warning, without even letting you defend yourself. That's not business. That's personal, and it's bullshit. Marcus stepped forward. Alina, we've all been watching what he's done to you over the past few months. The way he's undermined you, taken credit for your work. We've seen him do it to others, too. Good people who he pushed out because they threatened his control. We're tired of it. We're tired of working for someone who values power over people, who treats employees like disposable assets. Amy nodded. You taught us to have integrity, to stand up for what's right. We'd be hypocrites if we didn't stand up for you. David added. Plus, we all know that department is going to crash and burn without us. Richard just lost his entire innovation division in one morning. The projects we're working on, the client relationships, the institutional knowledge, it all just walked out the door. He's going to realize what he's done. I looked at each of them. These brilliant, talented people who just sacrificed everything to support me. I felt overwhelming gratitude mixed with crushing guilt. What are you all going to do now? How are you going to pay your bills? This is my fight, not yours. Jessica smiled. It's our fight now, and honestly, we'll be fine. We're all highly skilled professionals. We'll land on our feet. The question is, what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I'd just been publicly humiliated and fired by my billionaire father-in-law. My reputation in the industry was probably destroyed. I had a prenup that meant I couldn't rely on Daniel's money, and I had absolutely no plan. For the first time in my adult life, I had no plan. The thought was terrifying and oddly liberating at the same time. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. My phone rang again. Daniel, I couldn't avoid him forever. I need to take this, I said. My team nodded and stepped away slightly to give me privacy. I answered. Alina, what the hell happened? I just got off the phone with my father. He said he had to let you go, that your project was fundamentally flawed and you became defensive when he questioned it. That's not what really happened, is it? I could hear the hope in Daniel's voice. The hope that his father was telling the truth, that there was some reasonable explanation, that this was all a misunderstanding. It broke my heart. No, Daniel, that's not what happened. Your father fired me in the middle of my presentation. In front of the entire board, he didn't let me finish, didn't give me a chance to respond. He just stood up and terminated me on the spot. Silence on the other end. Then what? That can't be right. Why would he do that? Because he's been trying to get rid of me for months, you know that. We've talked about this. The undermining, the rumors, the sabotage, this was just the final move. I heard Daniel take a shaky breath. Where are you right now? Outside the building. I just finished packing my office. Security escorted me out. I'm coming to you. Stay there. I'm getting in a car right now. Daniel, wait. But he'd already hung up. I stood there holding my phone, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. My marriage was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. Daniel loved his father. Despite everything, despite Richard's coldness and controlling nature, Daniel still wanted his approval, still hoped for a real relationship with him. And now he was going to have to choose, me or his father, our marriage or his family legacy. I didn't know which way that choice would go, and that terrified me. 20 minutes later, a black car pulled up to the curb. Daniel jumped out before it even fully stopped. He looked frantic. His hair was messy like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were red. He spotted me and rushed over, pulling me into his arms. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I never should have encouraged you to work there. I knew what he was capable of. I let myself lean into him for a moment, let myself feel safe in his arms, but then I pulled back. This isn't your fault. This is between me and your father. No, it's not. He did this because of me, because you're married to me. He's punishing you to control me. That's what he does. That's what he's always done. Daniel's voice was bitter, full of years of resentment. He called me right after the board meeting. Told me he'd done me a favor, that you were becoming a liability to the company and to our marriage, that I'd thank him eventually. Can you believe that? He actually thinks he did the right thing. I felt anger surge through me, burning away the numbness. A liability? I generated over $200 million in revenue for that company. I built an entire division. I was about to transform their entire operational infrastructure, and he calls me a liability. I know. I told him he was wrong. I told him what he did was unforgivable. He hung up on me. Daniel looked lost, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. What do we do now? Before I could answer, Jessica walked over. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we should probably all get out of here. Security is watching us from the lobby, and I'm pretty sure Richard is going to try to enforce the non-compete clauses in our contracts. That brought me back to reality. The non-compete clauses, of course. Richard wouldn't just let us walk away. He'd use every legal tool at his disposal to make sure we couldn't work in the industry, to punish us for defying him. You're right. Everyone should go. Get somewhere safe. Talk to your families. And for God's sake, talk to lawyers before you sign anything or accept any severance packages. My team started to disperse, each person giving me a hug or a word of encouragement before they left. Within 5 minutes, it was just me and Daniel on the sidewalk. Come on, he said gently. Let's go home. We'll figure this out together. We got in the car with my 3 boxes of personal belongings. As we pulled away from Sterling Global Headquarters, I looked back at the massive glass tower. Somewhere up on the 47th floor, Richard Sterling was probably congratulating himself, thinking he'd won, thinking he'd put me in my place and reminded everyone who really held the power. He had no idea what he'd just started. No idea that by humiliating me, by taking everything I'd worked for, he'd freed me. I no longer had anything to lose, and that made me dangerous. The car ride home was quiet. Daniel held my hand the entire time, occasionally squeezing it like he was making sure I was still there. We lived in a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. Daniel had bought it before we got married, insisted it be only in his name so Richard couldn't claim it was family property. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I was grateful. At least I still had a home. We walked inside and I immediately kicked off my heels. My feet ached. My entire body ached. The adrenaline was wearing off and exhaustion was setting in. Daniel set my boxes down in the hallway and turned to me. What do you need? What can I do? I looked at my husband. My kind, supportive husband who was caught in the middle of a war he never asked for. I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. Do you think there's any chance of fixing this? Of me getting my job back? Of your father apologizing? Daniel's face fell. He knew what I was really asking. Could our relationship with Richard be salvaged? Could we ever be a real family? No, he said quietly. I don't think so. When my father makes a decision like this, he doesn't back down. It would mean admitting he was wrong, and he never admits he's wrong. I nodded. I'd known the answer, but I needed to hear him say it. Okay. Then I need you to be honest about something else. Where do you stand in this? Are you on my side or his? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yours, always yours. You're my wife. You're my partner. What he did was cruel and wrong, and I will never forgive him for it. Relief flooded through me. Whatever happened next, at least I had Daniel. Good, because I'm not going to just accept this. I'm not going to quietly disappear and let him win. I'm going to fight back. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I mean I'm going to make him regret what he did. I'm going to show him exactly what he lost when he fired me. I'm going to build something bigger and better than anything at Sterling Global. And I'm going to do it with the 22 people who walked out with me. A slow smile spread across Daniel's face. You're going to start your own company. Yes, I'm going to become his competition. I'm going to take market share, clients, talent, everything. I'm going to hit him where it hurts most, his bottom line and his ego. Daniel pulled me close and kissed my forehead. Then I'm all in, whatever you need. My trust fund, my connections, my time, it's all yours. I pulled back and looked at him seriously. Daniel, if I do this, if I really go to war with your father, it's going to get ugly. He's going to try to turn your whole family against me, against us. He might even try to cut you off financially or legally. Are you prepared for that? Daniel took a deep breath. My whole life, I've watched my father bully people, use his money and power to control everyone around him. He did it to my mother until she left. He did it to business partners, employees, even friends. I've always hated it, but I never stood up to him. I always told myself it wasn't my fight, that I could just stay out of it by not being involved in the business. But this is different. He came after you. He hurt the person I love most in the world. So yes, I'm prepared. Let him do his worst. I'd rather have integrity and you than his money and approval. I felt tears finally start to fall. Not tears of sadness or defeat. Tears of gratitude and determination. I love you, you know that, right? I love you too, and we're going to get through this together. We stood there in our hallway, holding each other, making silent promises. The war with Richard Sterling had begun, and we were ready. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with possibilities, plans, fears, and what-ifs. I kept replaying the boardroom scene over and over. Richard's cold voice. The shocked faces of the board members. The moment my team stood up for me. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Made coffee. Opened my laptop. Started making lists. If I was going to do this, I needed a plan. A real, detailed, executable plan. First, I needed to understand my legal situation. The non-compete clause in my contract. What it actually prevented me from doing. Whether Richard could enforce it given how he'd terminated me. I made a note to call an employment attorney first thing in the morning. Second, I needed to talk to my team. Find out who was serious about joining a new venture and who just made a gesture of solidarity but needed to find stable employment quickly. I couldn't blame anyone for backing out. What they'd done was already more than I could have asked. Third, I needed capital. Starting a company, especially one that could compete with Sterling Global, required serious money. Daniel's trust fund would help, but it wouldn't be enough. I'd need investors, which meant I'd need a pitch, a business plan, financial projections, a compelling vision. Fourth, I needed to move fast. Every day that passed was a day Richard could use to shore up his defenses, to poach my team back with better offers, to spread his version of the story and damage my reputation beyond repair. Speed was essential. By the time the sun came up, I had 10 pages of notes, potential company names, service offerings, target markets, competitive advantages. It was rough, but it was a start. Daniel found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "Have you been up all night?" he asked, concerned. "Couldn't sleep, had to start planning." He sat down across from me and looked at my notes. "This is incredible, you've already got a framework. It's just a beginning, there's so much to figure out. Legal issues, funding, recruitment, branding, technology infrastructure, office space. The list is endless." Daniel smiled. "Good thing you're the most organized and driven person I know. If anyone can pull this off, it's you." His confidence in me was reassuring, but I also felt the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about me anymore. 22 people had tied their futures to mine. I couldn't let them down. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Can't sleep either. Been thinking about the company idea. I'm in, 100%. Let's burn it all down and build something better." Then Marcus. "Just so you know, I'm serious about this. Whatever you're planning, count me in." Then Amy, then David. One by one, messages from my team, all saying the same thing. They were in. They were ready to fight. I showed the messages to Daniel. He grinned. "Looks like you've got your founding team." "Looks like I do." The reality of it hit me then. This was really happening. I was really going to start a company, compete with a billion-dollar empire, take on one of the most powerful men in American business. It was insane. It was reckless. It was terrifying. And I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Daniel stood up. "Okay, first things first. You need a shower, real food, and at least a few hours of sleep. Then we're calling the best employment attorney in New York. After that, you're meeting with your team and making this official. And tomorrow, we're going to my bank and liquidating my trust fund." I stared at him. "Daniel, that's over $10 million. Are you sure?" He didn't hesitate. "Completely sure. My grandfather left me that money to build something meaningful with my life. I can't think of anything more meaningful than this. Helping you, fighting back against everything my father represents. This is what the money should be used for." I stood and wrapped my arms around him. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. We deserve each other. Now go shower. You smell like stress and old coffee." I laughed, actually laughed. For the first time since walking out of that boardroom, I felt something other than shock and anger. I felt hope. The shower helped. The food helped. And surprisingly, I managed to sleep for a few hours. When I woke up, it was early afternoon and Daniel had already made calls. We had an appointment with an attorney at 4. I spent the time until then reaching out to my team individually, setting up a meeting for the next day. By evening, everything was in motion. The attorney, Patricia Morrison, was a sharp woman in her 50s with a reputation for destroying corporations in wrongful termination suits. She listened to my story, asked detailed questions, and took pages of notes. When I finished, she sat back and smiled. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of wrongful termination I've seen in years. No warning, no documentation of performance issues, no progressive discipline. Just a public firing in retaliation for your success and your relationship with his son. We can absolutely fight the non-compete. In fact, I'd argue that given the circumstances, it's completely unenforceable." "How long will that take?" I asked. "In court, could be months. But I can file an injunction immediately preventing Sterling Global from enforcing it while we litigate. That should give you breathing room to start your company. And honestly, I doubt Richard will want this to go to trial. Discovery would be very unfavorable to him. All those emails, all those witnesses to his behavior, it would be very ugly and very public. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Richard valued his reputation and control above everything. A public trial where his behavior was exposed would be his worst nightmare. Do it. File everything. I want him to know I'm not backing down. Patricia nodded approvingly. I like you. This is going to be fun. I'll have the paperwork filed by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction you had with Richard, every email, every witness to his behavior. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position. Daniel and I left the attorney's office feeling energized. We had a legal strategy. We had a plan. Now we just needed to execute. The next day, my entire team met at a co-working space in Manhattan. All 22 people who'd walked out with me, plus Daniel. We gathered in a large conference room. I stood at the front, looking at these incredible people who'd sacrificed so much to support me. Thank you all for being here. I know the last 48 hours have been insane. You all made a split-second decision to walk out with me, and I want to make sure everyone understands what happens next. First, I've spoken with an attorney. She's confident we can fight the non-compete clauses. That means we're legally free to start our own venture. Second, I want to be completely transparent. I'm planning to start a company that will directly compete with Sterling Global, a consulting and technology firm focused on digital transformation. Everything we were doing there will do better here, but this is risky. It's going to be hard. We'll be fighting against a billion-dollar company with unlimited resources. There are no guarantees of success. So I need to know right now who's truly committed to this. And if anyone needs to step back and find stable employment elsewhere, I completely understand. There's no judgment. I paused and looked around the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Jessica stood up. I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're not going anywhere. We believe in you. We believe in what we can build together. And we're ready to show Richard Sterling what happens when you underestimate good people. The room erupted in agreement. People nodding, voicing their support. I felt overwhelmed with emotion. Okay then, let's build something extraordinary. We named the company Momentum Innovations. The name felt right. We had momentum, we were innovating, and we were moving forward, not looking back. Well, that's what I told myself anyway. The truth was, every decision I made, every strategy I planned, I was thinking about Richard Sterling, about proving him wrong, about making him regret what he'd done. Maybe that was petty, maybe I should have been above it, but I wasn't, and I didn't care. The first 2 weeks were chaos. Beautiful, exhausting, terrifying chaos. We set up a temporary office in a shared workspace in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, just desks, laptops, and unlimited coffee. It was a far cry from the luxury of Sterling Global's 47th floor, but it was ours. Daniel liquidated his trust fund like he promised, $11.3 million. When the transfer went through, I stared at the bank statement for a solid 5 minutes. That money represented his entire inheritance from his grandfather, his safety net, his freedom, and he'd given it all to me, to us, to this crazy dream of taking down his father's empire. No regrets, he said when he saw my face. This is the best thing I've ever done with that money. We used $2 million to cover initial operating expenses. Salaries for the team, even though everyone had agreed to take half their previous pay until we were profitable. Legal fees because Patricia Morrison didn't work cheap. Technology infrastructure, basic office equipment. The remaining $9 million was set aside for growth and emergencies. It sounds like a lot of money, and it was. But in the world of corporate consulting and enterprise technology, it was a shoestring budget. We needed more, which meant I needed to pitch investors. The thought made me nauseous. Pitching meant facing people who'd heard Richard's version of events, who might see me as a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind, who might not want to bet against Sterling Global, but I didn't have a choice. I created a pitch deck that I revised approximately 70 times. Jessica and Marcus helped me refine the financial projections. Amy worked on the brand identity and marketing strategy. David mapped out our technology architecture. We were building a real company, not just an idea. Our value proposition was simple. Everything Sterling Global did, we'd do better, faster, and more cost-effectively. We'd use cutting-edge technology. We'd prioritize client relationships over profit margins. We'd be agile where they were bureaucratic. We'd be innovative where they were stuck in legacy systems. On paper, it looked good. Great, even. But I knew the real challenge would be convincing people to take a chance on us. My first pitch meeting was with Catherine Yang, a venture capitalist known for investing in female-founded companies. I'd met her briefly at a conference 2 years ago. She'd given me her card and told me to reach out if I ever wanted to talk. I never did. Now I was hoping she'd remember me. Her office was in Soho, in a beautiful converted loft with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, very different from the corporate sterility of Sterling Global. Catherine met me herself, no assistant, no formality. She was in her early 40s, dressed casually in jeans and a blazer with an easy smile that put me slightly at ease. "Alina Moss," she said, shaking my hand. "I was hoping I'd hear from you. I've been following your story." My stomach dropped. "You have. The industry is small. Word travels fast, especially when someone walks out of Sterling Global with their entire leadership team. That's the kind of story people pay attention to." I couldn't read her tone. Was that good or bad? "I hope you're hearing the true version, not Richard Sterling's version." Catherine gestured for me to sit. "Why don't you tell me your version? I'm all ears." So I did. I told her everything. How Richard had undermined me from the beginning. How he'd sabotaged my projects and spread rumors. How he'd fired me in front of the board without cause. How 22 people had walked out in solidarity. How we'd formed Momentum Innovations. I showed her our pitch deck, our financial projections, our client acquisition strategy. I laid it all out. When I finished, Catherine sat back and studied me. "You know what I see when I look at this? I see someone who's motivated by revenge, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the most successful companies were born from spite. But I need to know what happens when the revenge is satisfied. When you've proven Richard wrong, when you've taken market share from Sterling Global, when you've made him look foolish, what then? Will you still have the drive to build this company, or will it have served its purpose?" The question caught me off guard. I've been so focused on the immediate goal of fighting back that I hadn't thought about the long game. Honestly, I don't know. Right now I'm running on anger and determination, but I also genuinely believe in what we're building. The consulting model is broken. Big firms charge enormous fees and deliver cookie-cutter solutions. We can do better. We can actually transform businesses instead of just collecting retainers. So yes, this started as revenge, but it's becoming something more. Catherine smiled. "That's the right answer, the honest answer. I'm going to invest $5 million for 15% equity, but I have one condition." I tried not to show my shock. $5 million. She was actually going to invest $5 million. What's the condition? "You need to bring in a CFO, someone with serious experience. Your team is brilliant on the innovation and execution side, but you need financial expertise if you're going to scale. I have someone in mind, Robert Chen, former CFO of a major consulting firm. He's been looking for his next opportunity. I think you two would work well together." I didn't hesitate. "Done. When can I meet him?" "I'll set it up for next week. In the meantime, I'll have my lawyers draw up the investment paperwork. Welcome to the portfolio, Alina. I think you're going to do great things." We shook hands and I somehow made it out of her office before I started shaking. $5 million, a major investor who believed in us. This was real. This was actually happening. I called Daniel immediately. "We got it. Catherine Yang is investing $5 million. He shouted so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "That's incredible." "I knew you could do it. It's just the beginning. We need clients now, real clients with real projects." That turned out to be the hardest part. For 2 weeks, I pitched every contact I had, every company I'd worked with at Sterling Global, every connection from my previous jobs, every lead I could find. And I got rejected, over and over. Polite rejections, mostly. "We're very impressed with your vision, but we're in a hearing freeze right now. We'd love to work with you, but we already have a contract with Sterling Global. This sounds great, but you're too new. Check back with us in a year when you're more established." The worst part was knowing that Richard was behind some of these rejections. I'd hear through the grapevine that he was calling companies we'd pitched, reminding them of Sterling Global's long relationship with them, suggesting that working with us would be seen as a betrayal, offering special rates to keep them locked in. He was using every bit of his power and influence to starve us out before we could gain traction. It was ruthless. It was effective, and it made me more determined than ever. Then we got our break. A mid-sized pharmaceutical company called Biogenics was looking to overhaul their entire data management system. They'd been working with Sterling Global for 6 months with terrible results. The project was behind schedule and over budget. They were ready to fire Sterling and start over. Jessica had a contact there, a VP of technology named Karen Liu. She agreed to meet with us. I brought Jessica, Marcus, and our new CFO, Robert Chen. Catherine had been right about Robert. He was brilliant, experienced, and completely believed in our mission. The meeting was at Biogenics headquarters in New Jersey. We presented our approach, showed them how we diagnose their current issues, outlined an implementation timeline that was half the length of Sterling's, provided a budget that was 30% lower. Karen and her team were impressed but cautious. "This looks great on paper," Karen said, "but you're a brand new company. How do we know you can actually deliver? Sterling Global has been around for 40 years. They have resources, infrastructure, reputation. You have 23 people in a shared office space in Brooklyn. No offense, but it's a big risk." I'd prepared for this objection. I pulled out a document and slid it across the table. "This is a list of every project I led at Sterling Global over the past 3 years. 13 major implementations, all delivered on time or early, all under budget, all exceeding performance metrics. The people who executed those projects are sitting at this table with me. We're not unproven. We're the proven team that Sterling was taking credit for." I pulled out another document. "And this is Sterling's track record on projects that I wasn't involved in over the same period. 8 projects, 6 were late, 5 were over budget, 2 were complete failures that had to be scrapped. The difference isn't the company name, it's the people. And you can have the people who actually know what they're doing, or you can pay more for the brand name and get mediocre results." Karen looked at the documents, then at her team, then back at me. "You're saying you were the secret sauce at Sterling Global." "I'm saying my team was. And now we're offering that same expertise at a better price point with more personalized attention. We'll assign a dedicated team to your project. We'll have weekly check-ins with you personally. We'll treat you like our most important client because, frankly, you would be. Sterling Global has hundreds of clients. You're one contract among many. To us, you're everything. We will move heaven and earth to make sure this project succeeds." There was a long pause. Karen looked at her colleagues. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then she turned back to me. "Okay, we'll do it, but we want a performance clause in the contract. If you don't hit your timeline and budget, you forfeit part of your fee." Robert jumped in. "That's fair. We'll agree to that if you agree to pay a bonus if we exceed expectations. Early delivery under budget above performance targets." Karen smiled. "Deal. I'll have our legal team draw up the contract." We walked out of Biogenics with our first client, a $2.4 million contract. The entire team celebrated that night. We took over a small restaurant in Brooklyn, drank too much wine, and felt like we'd won the lottery. Because in a way, we had. One client gave us credibility, gave us a case study in progress, gave us proof that we could compete. Word spread fast. Within 2 weeks, we had 3 more pitch meetings, a healthcare provider, a financial services firm, a manufacturing company, all companies that had been burned by big consulting firms, all looking for something different. We landed 2 of the 3, $5.7 million in new contracts. We were cash flow positive. We were actually doing it. But Richard wasn't going to let it go that easily. 2 months after we landed the Biogenics contract, I got a call from Karen. She sounded stressed. "Elena, we have a problem. I just got a call from Richard Sterling himself. He's threatening to sue Biogenics for breach of contract. He's claiming that by hearing you, we're enabling the violation of your non-compete agreement. His lawyers are saying they'll tie us up in litigation for years if we don't terminate our contract with you immediately." My blood ran cold. This was exactly the kind of move I should have anticipated. Richard couldn't beat us on merit, so he was using legal intimidation. "Karen, I'm so sorry. This is my mess, not yours. Let me handle it." "How? He's Richard Sterling. He has unlimited legal resources. We're a mid-sized pharmaceutical company. We can't afford a protracted legal battle with Sterling Global." "You won't have to. My attorney already filed an injunction against the non-compete. It's unenforceable. Richard knows that. This is a bluff. He's counting on you being scared enough to back down without actually going to court." "Are you sure?" Karen asked, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "I'm sure, but I understand if you need to protect your company. If you want to pause the project until this is resolved, I get it." There was a pause. Then Karen said something that surprised me. "No, we're not pausing anything. We signed a contract with you in good faith. Your team has been doing excellent work. We're 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I'm not going to let Richard Sterling bully us into breaking that contract. If he wants to sue, let him sue. We'll fight it." I felt a surge of gratitude and respect. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret this." But Richard didn't stop there. Over the next month, he escalated. He had Sterling Global's PR team plant stories in business publications. Former Sterling executive starts competing firm with subtle implications of corporate espionage and stolen intellectual property. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The stories were out there, creating doubt. He reached out to our other clients with similar legal threats. One of them, the financial services firm, caved and terminated our contract. We lost $1.8 million in revenue. He even went after our investors. Called Catherine Yang personally and suggested she was making a mistake, that we were a liability, that she should cut her losses before we imploded. To her credit, Catherine told him exactly where he could shove his advice, but the pressure was intense, constant, exhausting. There were days I wanted to give up, days where the weight of it all felt like too much. I was responsible for 23 people's livelihoods, their families, their futures. And I was leading them into a war against an enemy with vastly superior resources. Daniel saw me struggling. One night, he found me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, staring at my laptop, trying to figure out how to counter Richard's latest attack. "You need to sleep," he said gently. "I can't. If I don't figure this out, we're going to lose another client, maybe 2. And if we start losing clients, we can't make payroll. And if we can't make payroll, everyone who believed in me is going to suffer." Daniel closed my laptop and took my hands. "Listen to me. You are not responsible for my father's cruelty. You are not responsible for his need to destroy anyone who defies him. You're doing everything right. You're building a good company with good people doing good work. That's all you can control. The rest is on him. But it's not enough. Being good isn't enough when you're fighting someone who's willing to be ruthless. Then maybe it's time to be a little ruthless yourself." I looked at my husband, sweet, idealistic Daniel who'd always avoided conflict, who'd spent his whole life trying to stay out of his father's world. "What do you mean?" "I mean stop playing defense, stop reacting to his attacks, go on offense, hit him where it hurts." "How?" Daniel smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm smile. It was something harder, something that reminded me he was, after all, Richard Sterling's son. "I know things about Sterling Global, things my father has told me over the years, thinking I wasn't paying attention or didn't care. I know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, and I think it's time we did some digging." That conversation changed everything. Over the next week, Daniel and I went through everything he knew about Sterling Global's operations, every shady deal, every corner cut, every regulation skirted, every employee mistreated. We found 3 major issues. First, Sterling Global had been systematically underbidding on government contracts and then charging hidden fees that weren't disclosed in the original proposals. Technically legal, but ethically questionable and possibly fraudulent depending on how the contracts were written. Second, they'd been classifying full-time employees as contractors to avoid paying benefits. This was affecting hundreds of people and was definitely illegal. Third, and most damning, Richard had been personally involved in pressuring a client to make a business decision that benefited Sterling Global's investment portfolio, a clear conflict of interest that violated multiple regulations. Daniel had emails, documents, recorded conversations from family dinners where Richard had bragged about these things, never imagining his son would use them against him. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" I asked Daniel. "Once we release this information, there's no going back. Your relationship with your father will be completely destroyed." Daniel didn't hesitate. "That relationship was destroyed the moment he fired you in that boardroom. Maybe it was destroyed long before that. I'm done protecting him. I'm done pretending he's anything other than what he is. A bully who uses his power to hurt people. It's time someone held him accountable." We gave everything to Patricia Morrison. She brought in a colleague who specialized in corporate fraud. Together, they compiled a complaint that they filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Labor, and the Federal Trade Commission. We also gave everything to a journalist named Marcus Webb who'd been investigating corporate corruption for the New York Times. We didn't do this quietly. We wanted maximum impact. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Sterling Global under federal investigation for fraud and labor violations. The article was devastating. It detailed everything: the government contract fraud, the misclassified employees, the conflicts of interest, and it quoted anonymous sources, former employees who'd witnessed Richard's behavior firsthand, people who'd been too scared to speak up before but found courage when they saw others coming forward. My phone started ringing before I even finished reading the article. Reporters wanting comments, clients wanting reassurance, investors wanting updates, and Richard. Richard called 17 times in the first hour. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say to him. Daniel did answer once. I was sitting next to him when he took the call. I could hear Richard screaming through the phone. Accusations, threats, disbelief that his own son would betray him like this. Daniel listened for about 30 seconds, then interrupted. You did this to yourself. Every decision you made, every person you hurt, every rule you broke, that was you. I just made sure people knew the truth. And if you ever contact Alina, me, or anyone associated with Momentum Innovations again, we'll release the rest of what we have. And trust me, there's more. He hung up. His hand was shaking. I held it. Are you okay? No, but I will be. I just destroyed my relationship with my father, possibly with my entire extended family. But I'd do it again. Because it was the right thing to do. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Sterling Global. The federal investigations launched. Trading of Sterling Global stock was halted pending the investigation. Richard was forced to step down as CEO temporarily while the board conducted an internal review. Clients started terminating their contracts, not wanting to be associated with a company under federal investigation, and employees started leaving. Good people who'd been unhappy for years but stayed because of the prestige and the paycheck. Now they were jumping ship, and many of them called us. Is Momentum Innovations hearing? Would you consider someone with my background? I've always admired your work and I'd love to be part of what you're building. We went from 23 employees to 47 in 3 weeks. We had to lease actual office space, a full floor in a building in downtown Brooklyn. We had to hire an HR manager and an office manager. We had to scale faster than I'd ever planned. But it was working. We were growing. We were thriving. And Sterling Global was crumbling. 3 months after the investigation began, the SEC announced their findings. Sterling Global was fined $240 million. They were required to reclassify hundreds of employees and pay back benefits plus penalties. And Richard Sterling was personally barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company for 10 years. His empire didn't collapse entirely. The company survived, but it was diminished, damaged. No longer the untouchable titan of industry, Richard himself became a cautionary tale. Business schools used his case as an example of what happens when ego and ethics collide. And me, I became something I never expected. A symbol, not just of revenge, but of standing up to power, of refusing to be silenced, of building something positive out of betrayal. 6 months after walking out of that boardroom, Momentum Innovations had 73 employees, 18 active clients, and $32 million in annual revenue. We weren't bigger than Sterling Global. We probably never would be, but we were successful, we were growing. And we were doing it the right way, with integrity, with respect for our people, with genuine care for our clients. The ultimate confrontation came at an industry conference 8 months after my firing. I was speaking on a panel about digital transformation. When I walked into the convention center, I saw him, Richard Sterling. He was standing in the lobby, looking older than I remembered. Thinner, more tired. Our eyes met across the crowded space. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he started walking toward me. My first instinct was to walk away. I didn't owe him a conversation, but something made me stay, made me stand my ground. He stopped a few feet away. Up close, I could see the toll the past months had taken, the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Alina! His voice was different, quieter, less commanding. Richard! We stood there in awkward silence. People were starting to notice, starting to stare. Finally, he spoke. I underestimated you. It wasn't an apology, but coming from Richard Sterling, it might have been the closest thing to one I'd ever get. Yes, you did. I thought if I removed you from the board, from the company, you'd disappear, fade away. I thought you were successful because of Sterling Global's resources, not your own talent. I was wrong. I waited. There had to be more. I also thought I was protecting my company, my legacy. I saw you as a threat to my control. I couldn't allow someone, especially someone who married into the family, to have that much influence, that much power, so I destroyed you before you could destroy me. At least that's what I told myself. And now, I asked. Now I realize I destroyed myself. My need to control everything, to dominate everyone, it cost me everything that mattered. My company's reputation, my career, my relationship with my son. And for what? Pride, ego, fear. He looked at me with something that might have been regret. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. And that what you've built with Momentum, it's impressive. You're doing things I never could. leading with integrity instead of intimidation, building loyalty instead of fear. You're a better leader than I ever was." I didn't know what to say. I'd imagined this confrontation so many times. In my fantasies, I'd have the perfect cutting remark, the devastating comeback that would destroy him the way he'd destroyed me. But standing there, looking at this diminished version of the man who'd once seemed so powerful, I felt something unexpected. Pity. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "But you're right. I'm not ready to forgive you. Maybe I never will be. What you did to me in that boardroom, that humiliation, that betrayal, it changed me. It made me stronger, yes, but it also hurt me in ways I'm still processing. So no, I don't forgive you, but I also don't hate you anymore. Hate takes energy, and I'd rather spend that energy building something good than dwelling on what you did." Richard nodded slowly. "That's fair, more than fair. I hope someday I can earn back my son's respect, if not yours. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm going to try to be better, to do better. It's too late to save my career, but maybe not too late to save whatever's left of my character." He extended his hand. I looked at it for a long moment, then I shook it, not because I forgave him, not because we were suddenly okay, but because I was choosing to let go of the anger, to move forward without the weight of hatred holding me back. "Goodbye, Richard. Goodbye, Alina, and congratulations on everything." He walked away. I watched him go, this man who'd once held so much power over my life, who'd tried to destroy me and ended up destroying himself. And I felt nothing but relief that that chapter was finally closed. Daniel found me a few minutes later. "I saw you talking to him. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I actually am." He apologized, sort of. Not in so many words, but as close as Richard Sterling gets to an apology. "Do you believe he meant it?" I thought about it. "I think he's realized what he lost. Whether he's actually changed or just scared and alone, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. He can't hurt us anymore. We've moved beyond him." Daniel pulled me close. "I'm proud of you for hearing him out, for being the bigger person." "I'm not being the bigger person, I'm just being done with him. There's a difference." We went to my panel together. I spoke about digital transformation, about building company culture, about leading with authenticity. The room was packed. People were taking notes, asking questions, treating me like an expert, like someone worth listening to, because I was. Not because of who I married, not because of who fired me, but because of what I'd built, the work I'd done, the team I'd led, the results I'd delivered. After the panel, at least a dozen people came up to me, some wanting to hire us, some wanting jobs, some just wanting to say they'd been following my story and were inspired. One woman, probably in her mid-20s, waited until everyone else had left. Then she approached hesitantly. "Ms. Moss, I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to tell you something. I work for a big consulting firm. My boss is a lot like Richard Sterling. Controlling, dismissive, takes credit for my work. I've been miserable for 2 years, but too scared to leave because of the prestige. The money, the fear that I couldn't make it on my own. But watching what you did, how you fought back and built something better, it gave me courage. I handed in my resignation this morning. I'm starting my own practice, and I just wanted to say thank you for showing me it was possible." I felt tears prick my eyes. This is what it was all about, not revenge, not defeating Richard Sterling, but showing people that you don't have to accept mistreatment, that you can stand up for yourself, that you can build something better. "Thank you for telling me that," I said, "and good luck. If you ever need advice or support, reach out. We're all in this together." She smiled and walked away, and I felt something settle in my chest. Purpose, meaning. This was bigger than my story now. It was about changing the culture, showing that integrity and success weren't mutually exclusive, that you could win without becoming the villain. Over the next year, Momentum Innovations continued to grow. We hit 50 million in revenue. We expanded to a second office in San Francisco. We won awards for workplace culture and innovation. Forbes featured us in an article about the future of consulting. And through it all, I kept in touch with that young woman who'd quit her job. Her name was Sarah, and her independent practice was thriving. She'd even referred 2 clients to us. Small world. Full circle. The best moment came on the 1-year anniversary of my firing. My team surprised me with a celebration at the office. Cake, champagne, speeches about how far we'd come. Jessica stood up and raised her glass. A year ago, 23 of us walked out of a luxury boardroom and into complete uncertainty. We didn't know if we'd succeed. We didn't know if we'd even survive. But we knew that what happened to Alina was wrong, and we knew that we wanted to build something better. Today, we're 92 people strong. We're profitable. We're growing. And we're doing work we're proud of with people we respect. So here's to Alina for having the courage to fight back, And here's to all of us for being crazy enough to follow her." Everyone cheered. I looked around at the faces of my team. Some were people who'd walked out with me that first day. Others had joined later, attracted by our mission and our culture. All of them were brilliant, dedicated, passionate about what we were building. "Thank you," I said, my voice catching. A year ago, I thought my career was over. I thought I'd lost everything. And in a way, I had. I lost the prestige of working for Sterling Global. I lost the security of a steady paycheck. I lost the relationship with my father-in-law, not that it was ever great to begin with. But what I gained was so much more valuable. I gained all of you. I gained the freedom to build something that reflects our values. I gained the knowledge that success doesn't require sacrificing your integrity. That you can lead with kindness and still drive results. That standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, is always worth it. So thank you for taking this leap with me, for believing when it would have been easier to doubt, for working hard and staying committed even when things got tough. This isn't my success, it's ours. We built this together. More cheers, more champagne, more celebration. Later that night, Daniel and I sat on our brownstone's rooftop looking at the city lights. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" I thought about the question, really thought about it. "No, I mean, I wish it hadn't happened the way it did. I wish your father and I could have had a real relationship. I wish I hadn't had to go through the humiliation and the pain. But would I trade where I am now to go back to where I was? Never. This past year has been the hardest and the best year of my life. I learned what I'm capable of. I learned who my real allies are. I learned that I don't need anyone's permission or approval to be successful. So no regrets." Daniel kissed my forehead. "I'm glad, because I don't have any regrets either. Walking away from my father, supporting you, being part of this journey, it's been hard. But it's also been the most meaningful thing I've ever done. I spent my whole life avoiding my father's world, telling myself I was different. But I wasn't standing against him. I was just standing aside. Now I'm actually making a difference, actually building something that matters, and that feels good." We sat there in comfortable silence, holding hands, looking at the future. A future we'd built together. A future that belonged to us. The war with Richard Sterling was over. We'd won. Not by destroying him, though there was certainly collateral damage, but by proving that his way wasn't the only way. That power through intimidation was inferior to leadership through inspiration. That integrity and success could coexist. And most importantly, that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, had the right to make you feel small. Richard Sterling had tried to erase me, to put me in my place, to remind me that I was just his son's wife, nothing more. Instead, he'd freed me, forced me to discover what I was really capable of, given me the motivation to build something extraordinary. In a twisted way, I owed him. Not that I'd ever tell him that, but it was true. His worst impulse, his need to destroy me, had been the catalyst for my greatest success. 3 years after the firing, Momentum Innovations went public. We rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Our stock price jumped 37% on the first day of trading. We were valued at over $400 million. Daniel and I stood on the trading floor, watching the numbers tick upward, surrounded by our team, our investors, our supporters. Catherine Yang was there, beaming with pride. Robert Chen was calculating our market cap on his phone. Jessica, Marcus, Amy, David, and all the others who'd walked out with me that day were there, many of them now millionaires thanks to their equity stakes. It was surreal, overwhelming, perfect. A reporter from CNBC interviewed me live. "Ms. Moss, 3 years ago you were fired from Sterling Global. Today you're the CEO of a publicly traded company worth nearly $500 million. What would you say to other people facing similar setbacks?" I thought carefully about my answer. I'd say that setbacks are only permanent if you let them be. Yes, I was fired. Yes, it was humiliating and devastating. But I made a choice not to let that define me. I made a choice to fight back, to build something better, to prove my worth on my own terms. And I had help. I had an incredible team who believed in me. I had a husband who supported me unconditionally. I had investors who took a chance on us. Nobody does this alone. So my advice is, when you get knocked down, find your people. Find the ones who believe in you. And then get back up and show the world what you're capable of. Success is the best revenge, but it's an even better validation. The interview went viral. My phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues from Sterling Global congratulating me. People I'd gone to business school with reaching out. Strangers sharing their own stories of being underestimated and proving people wrong. and one message that surprised me. From Margaret, Richard's former assistant. Congratulations on everything you've achieved. You deserved all of it. I retired last year, but I wanted you to know that I always admired you. The way you handled yourself with grace even when things were difficult. You were one of the good ones. I'm glad you won.